Hello, welcome to the media equation and media literacy. We're going to talk about our relationships with media and trust today. So get ready for some trust falls with yourself. No, I'm kidding. We're doing them with robots. It'll be much more fun. So today, before we get started, make sure that you have read the textbook chapter and then we will get going. So before we really get started, I want you to stop and think about how you know whether a piece of media is trustworthy. And I want you to think about this hard enough that you can write down on a piece of paper or in another tab on your computer or in your notes app on your phone an answer to this question. This will come in handy later because you're going to need to answer this question on the discussion board on Schoology. So actually take the time to do it. Go ahead and pause my face and write an answer to this question now. Did you do it? Okay. So let's talk about the media equation, and we'll come back to that question of trust in a little while. So the media equation is about people's treatment of media objects. So the basic idea of the media equation is that computers are people too, other humans. So humans consider computers to be people. And before you say, nah, hold on. So the basic concept here is that people respond to media in the same ways that they respond to face-to-face interactions with other people. Now, this was not just a hypothesis that researchers had. This was an observation that researchers made after doing a lot of research, and they did not think that this would happen, and they were very surprised that it did. Even when we know that media is a representation, we still interact with it like it's a person. So when people are typing back and forth with a chatbot, they can still come to treat that chatbot like a friend and be sad when the chatbot goes away or cannot be talked to anymore. There are people who become very attached to their Roombas and are sad when the Roombas are broken, in the same way that people become very attached to their dogs or their cats and are sad when their dogs or their cats die. And you may think that that is very silly, but it is the same kind of emotional attachment. It's the same kind of emotional attachment that children form to stuffed animals. And this human ability to form strong attachments to sometimes inanimate objects is well documented and is a real physiological and emotional attachment. And again, before you laugh a lot at this, think back. If you have seen Castaway, were you sad when that volleyball floated away? Did you yell, Wilson? Because if you did, then you are part of this too. If you are sad when your computer breaks, or when your car breaks, if you give your car a name or think fondly about your phone, we humans are good at bonding. We bond with inanimate objects, even when they're not really alive, and we know that they are not. We give them personalities and names and form relationships with them. And that is just a thing that we do, especially when we all have to live in our houses by ourselves now. And we do this with our computers as well. And remember, as we learned when we were talking about visual images, our brains can't immediately tell the difference between things that are physically present and things that are representations. And so when we're interacting with screens, it is particularly difficult for us to tell the difference between something that's really there and something that's not. We know because of contextual cues. We know because, I can turn my laptop on and off. I know that it is a thing, but it's a thing that I'm magnificently attached to, and I am very sad when it does not work. And my computer has a name and a personality, and I have a bond with it. And I know that sounds weird, but it is also true. So my brain is kind of wired to do this, though. I rely and depend quite a lot on my computer. I use it to do my job. I use it for watching shows, for relaxation. I use it to connect to my people who don't live in my pod of quarantine with me. And I use it to get food now. And so it's important. It's important to my life. And so I feel very possessive of it. All right, so here is the equation. Media seems like real life to us. Media is real life. There is not a difference between online and in person in the way that we like to think that there is. People interact with media, especially computers, like it's another human. Okay, so to test this hypothesis, which again was an observation that researchers had made after doing a bunch of research, but they didn't know how far this observation carried. So they saw that people were treating computers like the computers were humans, and they were like, that's weird, but they didn't know to what extent theories of interpersonal interaction would hold true when you changed out one of the humans for a computer. So they tried this out in some well-studied interpersonal communication situations to see if this still held true. And I'm just going to go over a few of them with you, but it held true a lot. So the first is that people interact with media. Well, okay, so here's an example of a people interacting with the media, especially computer and robots, like it's another human. I am not giving the example of Ray interacting with BB-8 as if it's another human. I'm giving an example of you interacting with BB-8 as if it's another human, because, well, I mean, BB-8 rolls around and beeps, and yet, is BB-8 a person? I am pretty convinced that BB-8 is a person, but BB-8 only beeps and rolls around. How does that make BB-8 a person? I don't know. BB-8 is a person, though, in my brain, very firmly. BB-8 rolls around and beeps. That is fewer things than a parrot. Is a parrot a person? I have to think way harder about that. I am sure that BB-8 is a person. Why? I don't know. Robots are persons. Why are parrots not persons and robots are persons? I don't know. This is very hard. Maybe I should take a philosophy class. All right, so here are 3 of the ways that researchers tested the media equation. The first way was that they tested interpersonal distance. So people pay more attention to an on-screen character when they are humans when they appear to be closer. That is, when their face fills more of the screen. And so researchers tested this with non-human characters, robots or computers, to see if this was also true in the same way. And they found that it was. Here is my favorite robot. This is Baymax, he is an entire medical entity and also a friend, and I want one. The second thing that they tested was similarity and attraction. And people like other humans more when the other humans seem to have similar personalities to them and have a lot in common with them. And so researchers wanted to see if people liked computers more when the machines seemed to have similar personalities to them. And so they tried that out, and they found out that that is true. People like computers more when the machines seem to have similar personalities to them. And of course, we like WALL-E. WALL-E seems like how we would be in that kind of situation, maybe. Third, they wanted to see if source credibility stayed the same. So people automatically attribute faceless content to the brand or to the outlet. So like people attribute faceless content to the magazine or to, so if you read an article in the New York Times and it doesn't say who the journalist was, you're just like, oh yeah, the New York Times. People do the same thing with computers. So they say, oh, this is the thing that the computer is doing. It's not the thing that the programmers did. And so people assume that the computer is acting of its own will and is doing things when really it can be a bug in the program or a thing that the programmers have overlooked. So people assume that Google, for instance, is a neutral source that objectively ranks all web pages equally and gives a reliable ranking of the results. But it's not. It's something that the ideologies of the programmers have decided what results should be at the top and what results should be at the bottom and how those things should be sorted. And those choices have been built into the structure of Google's retrieval systems. It's a lot more complicated than that, but those ideologies are built into the structure of the search engine. And it's not your computer making those decisions or Google's search engine making those decisions. Those decisions are made by the people who wrote the programs. So when you are being really mad at the self-checkout machine, it is not the self-checkout machine itself that is doing the bad. It was programmed in a way that is creating those problems, right? But it is so frustrating to use the self-checkout machines. Right. It's not just me. I have a PhD in communication, and I hardly ever can use the checkout machines without having to have somebody come over and swipe a thing because the self-checkout machine is mad at me for doing exactly what it said. And I worked as a cashier before, so like, I know how to do checking out. Terrible. All right, so it's Discuss with Teddy Bears time. This theory is from the early 1990s. Do you know what computers were like in the early 1990s? They had green televisions as their screens. They used only floppy disks. You had to use a phone line to dial up into the internet. You could only type. There were not graphics. Well, there are rudimentary graphics, but still. Nothing was realistic looking. You could not stream video. So when all this research was being done, Nothing on the internet looked real. How has computer-mediated communication changed in that time? If that theory was true in the early 90s, when almost everything was text-based, what parts of it do you think still work? What parts do you think maybe don't work anymore? And how could we update it to better fit today's media? So please discuss this with your teddy bears or siblings or parents or aunties or imaginary friends or your classmates on Snapchat or your alter ego or your stuffed frog, if you have one of those. All right, so let's return to that question we started out with. How do you know whether a piece of media is trustworthy? What are the ways that you can tell? What are the strategies that you use to evaluate a piece of media? And then, what does the media equation that we just learned add to our understanding of trust and media? What are some of the things that you can take from what we've just learned and apply to or add to the ways in which you evaluate a piece of media's trustworthiness? What are some of the other factors that affect whether media is trustworthy, that affect your ability to tell whether something is trustworthy or not? If this is an interesting question to you and you are interested in some more factors that affect your ability to tell if something's trustworthy or not, besides how long you've been alone in a house, I've linked a couple more videos about sleep deprivation and how that affects your brain's ability to make good decisions in the notes of this slide. They are very entertaining. Maybe don't watch them if you haven't had enough sleep lately, though. So take a nap and then watch them. They are very entertaining. So these two questions are going to be what you are going to discuss in engagement number 3, which is a discussion board that you're going to complete on Schoology. You need to answer those 2 questions in a post, and then you need to reply to 3 other people. Importantly, in your reply, you cannot just say, I agree or I disagree. You need to yes and other people. So you need to find something in their post that you find interesting and you need to build on it. So you need to say yes and then restate their point and then add to it in some way, expanding it, asking a question that like, yes, that's an interesting point that da 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 da. I wonder if we could think about it in this way. Ba, 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 ba. This is very similar to the practice of dialectical argument that we practiced, or dialectical discussion that we practiced early in the semester, if you can remember all the way back to early in the semester. And I want you to build on each other's conversations. It will give you more to say. It will help you get all the points for this engagement assignment, and it will allow you to have a much more interesting conversation with each other than, yes, I agree, no, I don't agree, which is what these kinds of discussions can often quickly turn into if you don't use a format like this. So make sure that you are yes and-ing, like in a good improv group. Before next class, you're going to be beginning Media Tracking 11, and reading chapter 14 on law and regulation. So I will see you next week. Have a wonderful day, and don't touch anybody else's face.